One of the best known accounts of the Old Testament is that of David and Goliath. People are very familiar with it, but not as familiar with the lesson that we learn from it. What does this teach us? David is young. He's already been anointed as king. He has yet to face any giants in his life, but he's about to face a big one. But it's not the last one he'll face, metaphorically speaking. And we learn the principle of how to face giants in this particular account. David is sent by his father from his sheep to take supplies to his brothers and to the men overseeing him. When he gets there, he checks in his supplies and he goes and starts talking with his brothers. And then the champion Goliath comes out. He's been coming out and defying the armies of God for 40 days, both morning and evening, saying, "Am I not a Philistine? Are you not soldiers of the army of Saul? Send one out to fight me. And if I win, then you will be our servants. And if you win, then we will be your servants." This terrified the men of Israel. They turned and they ran and they disappeared. David turned around and looked and no one was around. That's what giants do. They terrify us. We don't know how to handle them. We know we're going to be defeated by it. Whether you're talking about something external in your life that is a giant, whether it's talking about something in the lives of our children that we feel like we just can't help to overcome, or our parents or our loved one, or whether it's a giant in our own life, some behavioral issue, some stronghold, some addiction. We're just terrified and we don't know what to do. We feel defeated by it. That's exactly how the army of Israel felt. When David began talking to some of the men, they told them that Saul had incentivized the battle. He said anyone who will go out and fight this giant would become rich. His family would not have to pay taxes and he could marry one of the king's daughter. David turned again and said, "What did they say?" His older brother mocked him. "Who have you left those few sheep with in the wilderness?" Eliab had just hid from the giant, and now he's mocking David because David is showing signs of wanting to step up by faith and take on this giant that defies the army of the living God. And so David said to his older brother Eliab, "What have I done? Is there not a cause?" Now this is another lesson for us. Is there not a cause? Is it why we have giants in our lives that we have to overcome? Because all of us are called as salt and light. Is there not a cause? And so they repeated again what was going to happen. And David was brought to Saul. And David said to Saul, "Don't let your heart be troubled because of this giant. I am here to fight him." And you can imagine Saul looking at this youth thinking, "Yeah, right. You're not near my size and you're going to go out and fight him and you're a youth?" And Saul said to him, "You are but a youth, and this man has been a warrior since his youth. You cannot go out and fight him." And David responded, and here we need to listen closely, because we find one of the keys to overcoming a giant in our own life. David said, "Your servant, when he was watching the sheep, had a lion and a bear attack them. And I delivered a lamb from both the mouth of a lion and a bear. And when the bear turned on me, I took it by the beard and I killed it. And when the lion came at me, I took it by the beard and I killed it. And the same God that delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Now that's really important. David was looking for deliverance. He had seen God's deliverance in his life before, and he's looking for deliverance again. This isn't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get out there and into the battle and defeat that giant. This is trusting on God to be the deliverer. It's also not deliverance from a demonic force inside of David, as people would use deliverance today, but it's David trusting in God to deliver him from the bear, from the lion, and from the Philistines. And it's about us saying to God, "Lord, I trust you, and I believe your word, and I believe that you can deliver me from these giants in my life that I can't face." And then Saul dressed him in his armor. David couldn't walk in the armor, and so David took it off. We can't fight the battle in someone else's armor. So David took his sling, stopped and chose 5 smooth stones, and went out on the battlefield to face the giant. This is a moment of great faith. The giant would win 100 out of 100 times without God, but David trusted God who had been faithful to him before. And as he approached the giant, Goliath said, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" It says he disdained David. David wasn't holding anything. He was calling David a stick. "Am I a dog you come at me with a stick?" Then Goliath said, "Come here, boy, and I'm going to kill you and feed you to the birds." And David said to him, and again here, it's really important for us to learn how this deliverance works. David said, you come at me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come at you in the name of the living God. And I'm going to strike you and cut off your head and feed your entire army to the birds. Had you ever noticed that before? David not only had enough faith to take the enemy, Goliath, down, but to take the whole army out. Goliath said, I'm going to feed you to the birds. And David said, I'm going to feed your whole army to the birds. David stepped it up and enraged the Philistine. Then David said one more thing. The battle belongs to the Lord. David knew it needed to be deliverance. David knew you have to come at things in the name of the living God. And David knew the battle belongs to the Lord. And so the Bible tells us that David ran at the Philistine, putting the rock in his sling and shooting it at Goliath, hitting him right in the forehead, and the stone sunk in, and Goliath fell down face first. David stood over the giant, took out the sword, and cut off the giant's head. And then the army, now encouraged by David's faith, ran after the Philistines. The Philistines, seeing that their champion had been killed, turned and ran, and they defeated the Philistines all the way back to the gates of Gath. And they came back and plundered their tents, which was a boost for Israel because the Philistines had advanced armor, and they were able to take that armor, and now they possessed it. What is the lesson then? That when we face that stronghold, that difficulty, that addiction, that sin that we just can't seem to overcome, or something in the lives of our children, or some external thing that we find that we just can't handle, that we pray to God that we would be delivered, that we would trust God for his deliverance, and then we would battle these things in the name of the living God. David had to be out on the battlefield. You've got to be fighting against this stronghold, this thing that's got control of you, that you need deliverance from. You've got to fight it, but you know that you're fighting in the name of the living God. And as you fight it, deliverance will come, because God is the one who fights for us. God's the one who fights the battle. And if we can learn this lesson, then we'll learn to overcome strongholds, difficulties, hardships, any giant that we face. You got a giant in your life? You got something happening in the life of someone you love? You got your own struggles you can't seem to overcome? Then go and fight them in the name of the living God. Paul said something very similar in Philippians 4:13 when he said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. We often think that he's thinking of something grand and unbelievable that he's able to do because Christ strengthens him. But in the context, Paul is talking about his own struggle with covetousness. He said, I have learned how to abound, I have learned how to abase. And I've learned to be content in whatever state I am in, whether I have or whether I don't. In other words, he had learned to be content even when he had nothing. And then he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Whatever struggle you might be facing, whatever difficulty or stronghold, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Whatever addiction you're facing, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you, because God fights the battle. And may God set you free from that giant. May you find yourself standing solidly before him. Pray that you would have deliverance, and know that God fights the battle. And as you go out to fight them, you're going to find a deliverance and a victory, because Jesus said, Lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the age.